Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast, where leaders share their tools and practical advice to make you a better leader today. My name is Max Kozlowski. I will be your host. And today we have a giant of the beverage and consumer packaged good industry. He's been a senior vice president of the Dr. Pepper Snapple Group. He was a chief executive officer of Tampico Beverages, Essentia Water. He actually exited and sold to Nestle, which is definitely a lot of our hopes and dreams as CEOs, founders, and growers of companies. And he's now the co-founder and CEO of Nestle Water. One of the reasons why he's here is to talk a little bit about his new book, The Summit Mindset, Winning the Battle of You versus You. One of my favorite subjects, right? I really believe that everything that we have to do to get better ends up being in between our ears, and it's a consistent battle to become better and better. And we're going to definitely talk about some of those concepts there. He has a very strong focus on leadership, team, people development, all the subjects that we love to talk about and become better at implementing here. Without further ado, Scott Miller, so great to have you here. Thank you for being here, Scott.
Yeah, Max, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. A real honor. I look forward to talking to you about leadership, business, and life.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Scott. So before we get started, what's something good, positive, happy that's happening in your world?
Well, I think, we've just, as you said, we've just co-founded and started Nestle Water, which is really a positive feat. We launched February 27th in New York City, as well as California and LA. We have the Summit Mindset book coming out on September 12th of this year. And that's really a hybrid book that can help organizations and CEOs and individuals. So we wanted to create a book. I wrote that book with James C. Moore, a New York Times bestselling author, to really touch individuals. Whether your mom reads the book or a CEO in the boardroom, somebody can get something out of it. It's a prescriptive book. So we're all about trying to be people first and making a little difference on the journey of life and business that we all are on.
Well, thank you for sharing that, right? And it's incredible how your book, your passion, your career are all centered around people, leadership, helping teams become and perform better. So where did you first form your ideas on leadership, or when did you first become aware of this concept of leadership?
Yeah, I think leadership is something. I think often we think of leaders that you have to be running a big organization, but the first part of leadership is we're all leaders of ourselves, of our own lives, of our own personal journey. And I think that's really mission critical. And I think often people, well, I don't manage a team, I don't manage anybody. No, you manage yourself first. So leadership to me is very deep and very broad. It's about people. It's about understanding what are your personal pillars? What are the things that you define your life by? For me, it's about my faith, my family, others, and business, right? So my life kind of toggles there, and my leadership style is the same way. I've been a big reader of leadership. I love leadership. And I think, again, it starts with us, and it's an inside out job. And I always say leadership is really never about one of us, it's about all of us. So if we can collaborate together, we're all better leaders.
So tell me a little bit about, when was it when you were growing up, when you first entered the corporate world? When did this concept of leadership show up? I like to talk about that because it's like we all have this different moment of awakening into this concept of leaders, the people that are setting the vision or guiding or directing or helping others. But everybody has had a different experience on how that came into their awareness. So I'm curious of kind of when this first came into your awareness.
Yeah, Max, I think that's a great question. I mean, I agree with you that everyone's life has an intersection. Early on in my life, my intersection was I lost my dad at a young age. I came from very humble beginnings. And, we were very kind of real humble growing up, kind of poor. And quite frankly, on my dad's deathbed, when I was a young man, he turned to me and said, "I'm sorry." And I said, "What are you sorry for?" He said, "For not trying harder." So that was my really seared through me. And it was my first real intersection that I have to lead myself. And his weakness has to become my strength. And I've always been a constant reader and learner and looking to model people and individuals and businesses. I'm always looking for a nugget. How can I get better? So I would say that this started for me very young. And, in my 20s, I started to really roadmap my life. And I said, someday I want to be a CEO. And I remember going through employee reviews and people saying, "What do you want to do?" And I'd say, "I want to be a CEO someday." And my boss would kind of laugh at me and said, "Well, there's only one of those jobs." But I continue to stay on that journey. I continue to learn, to lead, and I think all leaders have to be learners. And I think we never stop evolving. So it happened to me very young in life, and I think I'm still on my journey to learn and lead. And I believe we have to learn from everyone. Every individual in life, you know something I don't know. Your neighbor knows something you don't know. And that's the essence of leadership, is we're always looking for a nugget of knowledge. So it's something that I've taken very seriously. I love working on the craft of leadership. And I think we never stop evolving on that journey.
So you had an unfortunate situation with your father, and I think it really kind of shook you and said, "Hey, I'm going to have to try harder, right? I don't want to make that same mistake." And it kind of energized you and fueled you, and you converted that negative into a positive that has kind of impacted your life. So how do you take this message of, sorry for not trying harder, convert that into like your life's meaning and purpose of continuous development and growth, and how do you infuse that into others? Because
Yeah,
I'm sure, to get to where you are and where you've been, you don't get there alone. So you bring other people with you.
always. You don't get anywhere alone. I think it takes all of us, not one of us. You heard me say earlier. But through my career, I've continued to share knowledge. I give books out to the organization. I take little quotes and I'll send them out on a text. Maybe it's 4 sentences. And I always know not everybody reads that book, not everybody reads that quote, but I'm trying to create a behavior, a learning behavior, shared knowledge in the organization. And I'm doing that through my own actions, and I'm sharing things what I see and what I'm learning, and trying to make sure that everyone knows we're all working to get another nugget, to get a little better. And when we do that together, quite frankly, we're better competitors, we're better humans, and we're better teammates. So I've always shared knowledge, and I talk all the time about we never stop evolving, and leadership is learning. So I like to share things in the organization. I like to get feedback. I like to listen to others, and I like to create a we culture, not a me culture. And that's really, really important. When you do that and you galvanize together as one team, you're a much more effective day to day. Everybody's a problem solver, and everybody wants to win together.
Wow, you gave us a lot there. So you're modeling the behavior, right? So you're saying, I want to be a culture where we're all learning, we're all growing. I'm interpreting your words, right? But sometimes it's not about reading the whole book, but it's about getting a couple of knowledge bits that you're actually going to be able to implement, discuss. They're going to transform your thinking and kind of propel you forward. When did you first learn about the importance of that? The importance of continuing to learn and to share knowledge and to ask others around you to do the same?
Yeah, I've been doing that since my, mid 20s, late 20s. I guess when I was probably 28, it really started to kick into my life. I started to see where I wanted to go from a vision perspective. And I always have played the long game, even today, right? I'm starting a new business today, and I'm still playing the long game, and I'm still looking to learn and still looking to evolve. And I think that is really, like, for all of us, it's about being in pursuit. I think everybody should have a North Star, and I think an organization should have a North Star, and we should all be in pursuit of something. When we do that, we continue to grow and evolve. And, in all of our lives, whether it's friends, families, or colleagues, we've seen folks that aren't in pursuit, and they lose their confidence and they lose their way. So I believe as long as I breathe, I'll always be in pursuit. I think it makes us better people, better teammates, and better friends, better family members.
I love that approach. Something, I don't know exactly where I learned this, but it's similar to what you're saying, is that I always want every single team member to be excited about and looking forward to something.
So,
Something in their personal life and something in business, something they're working towards. And I really like how you say, I'm playing the long game. And
so
and the long game never ends. It's always the long game. And you're always in pursuit of getting better, of improving. And it's the ultimate consummation of this idea of, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
absolutely.
And I think you're really doubling down on that idea, that it's about the journey of self-improvement and self-mastery and growth, and you're infusing that into the people inside your organization.
Yeah, you're doing that really by your own examples, right? And you're learning from others as well. You're trying to learn from them and get good feedback from them as well. It's creating good fundamentals. I believe building an organization is an inside out job, And I believe building individuals is an inside out job. We first have to look inward, organizationally or individually, and say, what do we stink at? What do we need to improve? Closing the gaps on our weakness makes us a better competitor. We all like to talk about what we're good at. Organizations don't like to talk about what they stink at. I always like to talk to an organization. Do we have a gap in supply chain? Do we have a gap in finance? Do we have a gap in marketing? Let's problem solve that together as a team. Let's not finger point. Let's solve it together. And also allows everyone to be a valuable voice. When people believe they can have a valuable voice, they're empowered to make a difference.
Thank you. I'm just taking notes here, and there's so much, and there's so much in what you've said here. So creating a good fundamentals, right? That is so essential. That is so essential. And I really do believe that we've got to look inward first before we can look outward. And we've got to look at our weaknesses so we know where you want to get better. And here's a fun part, and I'd love to get your take on this. But whenever an organization or the team in the organization feels really good and comfortable about where they are and how good they are, that's a good thing, right? To have confidence. But I always think that there needs to be a gap, right? If you're growing, you're expanding, and you have aspirations that are beyond your reach, that means there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be, which means there's going to be a system or a department that is not where it needs to be able to accomplish that goal. And sometimes people take that as a negative, but it sounds to me like you help them see it and understand it as a positive. It is good that we are not where we want to be versus it's bad that we're not where we want to be. How do you make that possible? How do you help people recognize that those gaps are a positive thing, and it doesn't reflect bad on them, but it actually reflects on our aspirations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing you do is you start saying we're a we culture. And communication is the easiest thing, but it's the hardest thing. It's kind of like common sense. It's common sense, but why is it not that common, right? So when communication is really a daily cadence, people feel really good about that. The other thing to communicate to the organization, to individuals, I always want to be constructively dissatisfied. That doesn't mean I'm hard on myself, the organization, but I'm always reviewing the tape. I'm always recalibrating, always looking at the film, because there's always something to improve. And when you take that approach, it's constant improvement. It's continuous improvement. And when the organization sees that it's not finger pointing or a weakness, but it's a strength, everybody kind of galvanizes together to get better. And you're always reviewing the tape. You're always recalibrating. And that's what great teams and individuals do. There is no finish line. And when you have that mindset, you are a learner. And honestly, if you don't do that, complacency sets in. And complacency is where dreams go to die, whether you're an organization or an individual. You can go look back to Kodak in the 70s and 80s, a multi-billion-dollar American company, didn't pivot, got passed by the digital age. They thought film-based revenue would be where the future is. And that was complacent, right? So we always have to continue to evolve. And that starts by looking inward, recalibrating, and being constructively dissatisfied.
I really like the concept of being constructively critical, right?
Yeah.
Reviewing the tape and figuring out where we have opportunities. And one of the things that I see a lot of is that, and I make fun of this, right? Like I call it the 1950s management style, where you have to be right, you have to have everything under control, that you have to have all the answers, and if you don't, then that means you're not valuable enough, and they're going to get someone that can. And that's really old stuff, but it's still prevalent, right? Like you still see that quite a bit.
Yeah. I think leadership today is about organizationally sharing the vulnerability of the organization, where the gaps are. I think individually as a leader, I want to talk about my own vulnerability. If I make a mistake, I want to apologize to the organization. If I miss something like putting an announcement on someone's promotion, hey, that one person that was important to them, I want to apologize for missing that. When the organization knows leadership's vulnerable and looks inward, they start to look inward. They start to understand we're all on this journey together, and we're all recalibrating, and we're practiced like we play every day. And it's no longer this 1950 management where you pound the desk and yell and scream. It's about inspiring and empowering people to get better. I want to be inspired and empowered by my teammates. I want to be a good teammate every day, right? When we started Yesly in January of this year, we had 3 employees. The first thing we did is set up our pillars. We want to be a we culture. We want to give back to our community. We want to serve every consumer with a mouth. And our North Star is to be the #1 enhanced still water beverage in America. Now, you might say, Scott, that's a lofty goal. That's right, it is. But we set our North Star. We know we're in pursuit of. Now, when we hire folks, we say, do they fit into our pillars? Are they a we culture or are they an I culture? We know who we want on our team. So it's about recognizing who you are and always looking inward and recalibrating. And that really is how you become the absolute best competitor, because you're always constructively dissatisfied. You always want improvement. And that's a great place to be. And when we're teammates like that, we just keep getting better.
I love that approach. Now let's talk about something that could be very useful to our audience there, leaders in their organizations. And something I face is that we want to hire people that are skilled and talented, knowledgeable, capable, but some of them come with some baggage. And sometimes the bug that I see is I already know, I have the answers, I've already done it, I have the experience. How do you get someone, how do you work with someone that is capable, knowledgeable, has been around, that has a skill set that you need, and help them become vulnerable, help them become and recognize that they don't have to have all the answers, that they need and could benefit from their team and the work around them, versus, yeah, I have all the answers, get out of my way, or if I show vulnerability, you're going to think I'm weak.
Great question. I think that it starts with, what is your culture? Many organizations, if you ask them the culture question, who are you? They don't know who you are. If you ask Yesly, this little company, tiny but mighty, with 20 employees, say, we'd say we're a we culture. So in an interview process, you start to say, is this person the smartest guy in the room syndrome, or are they part of the we culture? We want people that are part of a we culture. We want people that want to make a difference collectively, right? It's the old saying, there's really no I in team. So it starts with understanding, what kind of culture do you want to create? When you know that, you know what kind of folks you want to bring into your organization. And culture can never be a plaque on the wall. It has to be a living, breathing thing that evolves, that you talk about. You know, Max, when we do staff meetings, we put up our pillars. Hey, how are we doing on our pillars? We always stink at something. We're always really great at something. Okay, let's make some adjustments. How are we doing at our culture? Are we listening to folks? Are we being good teammates? Are we overreacting? That's the kind of people we want, that show that vulnerability, that just want this continuous improvement. So it really does start understanding, what kind of culture do you want to build? You know, when I was the CEO of Essentia, myself and the founder, Ken Uptain, we created our pillars and we said, we want to be a people first organization. During COVID, we ended up giving back $5,000 to each family with children 16 years of under, for homeschooling, for, you know, computers, for what they need. That's part of a people first culture, being actionable about what you say and not letting things be a plaque on the wall. When you live it and breathe it, when you practice like you play, people buy into it and they believe it. If not, people call BS on it pretty quick.
Yeah. I love that. I agree. I say the same thing. Culture is not something that's on the wall. It's not a few points. It's actually what is lived and breathed. And you say it and then you prove it with actions.
Correct.
The other thing you mentioned is this, and I find that smaller businesses have a really hard time with this, but that's exactly the reason why they stay small, which is they are too busy with the day-to-day activity to stop and reflect on their culture, reflect on their values, reflect on their goals, and assess their performance as a team. And they're only assessing the outcomes or results or lack thereof, right?
Yeah.
How would you advise a company that's kind of stuck in the whirlwind to start to step a little bit outside the whirlwind and to start looking at themselves inwardly, as you describe it?
Yeah, like I said, I think business and life is an inside out job. And I think you have to do the reps every day. The first thing you have to identify is, what is your culture? Who are you? And are you living, breathing that culture? Are you evaluating your culture? What you stink at, what you're good at? What is your North Star? And what are your pillars? What defines you, right? And then we talk at staff meetings all the time about how we're doing against those things. We evaluate ourselves. That's not a weakness, it's an absolute strength. And listen, some days I stink at things, and other days I'm great at things. That's just business and life. But if we know that, we're always doing that inside outside work. Super important. I think what happens with a lot of small startup businesses, they're really busy. They're drinking out of a fire hose. They're in chaos and they're like, I like chaos. No, I don't like chaos. I like to understand as much as I can by doing the reps, anticipating the curves in the road. There'll always be some I don't see. But if I have sound fundamentals and the organization has sound fundamentals and we're always recalibrating and looking inward, we're getting better. It's about smart action. Very, very important. And I think the need to step back on a weekly basis or on a daily basis when needed is mission critical to long-term success. Like I said, I play the long game. So it's okay with speed bumps, but I'm in it for a long haul. And you only do that through really sound fundamentals.
Definitely a subject worth discussing. So I work with small, medium, large businesses, and whether it's a division that needs to have its own vision and lofty goals, or it's a small business setting some lofty goals, I help them. And one of the things that I've realized over my 15 years of doing this is that you can't sit down and knock them out in one afternoon, right? You got to discover them, and they got to evolve over time, and then they become real, and they become the stuff that really connects to your heart and mind. And that's when you really know that it's driving a lot of emotion, and then you know that's real. So that part is what I call the easy part, right? You're working on discovering it and finding it. You've got someone like me helping you uncover it, because many times it's just natural or normal if you're not paying attention to it. Here's a part that is more challenging, which is the part of, okay, I've identified it, but how do I live it every day? Like, for example, how do I bring it into meetings? And I see that the top management, the CEO, the owner, has a little bit of a hard time in bringing it to the meeting, right? Putting it on the table. But mid-management, top management, other than the CEO, mid-management, they just do a horrible job with it. It feels like, and I see this consistently, and I've seen this in corporate, and I see this in small business, it feels inorganic. It feels forced, right? Where they show up in the meeting and take out the piece of paper, and it says, hey, part of our agenda says that we've got to review our point of culture, our values. And I think that it gets destroyed because it's not done correctly. How have you been able to actually do a good job of that, right? To bring it, to make it real, to make it organic, and to make it flow throughout the organization in a way that people really do care and connect with it. And it's not just something else I need to check off.
Great question. You're asking so many powerful questions. I think it starts with getting your leadership team together and saying, what is our culture? How do we define ourselves? What are our pillars? And often, to your point, Max, leadership doesn't have culture or pillars. And you have to say, let's get together and not define them by ourselves, but let's put it out to the organization. Let's develop them together. Let's not top down this, because nobody believes in top down. People believe when we all embrace it. Let's put it out for a vote. Let's put our pillars out for a vote. Let's talk to them together. Let's build our culture together. Let's do that. Let's have town hall meetings on a weekly basis and talk about what's wrong. And really, the one thing that never changes, it starts at the top with leadership. Leadership has to believe it and be willing to change. If not, nobody else buys in. And it gets to the point, if your team in your locker room decides they don't like the way you're building a culture, to like the way you're building pillars, there's other locker rooms to play ball in. But quite frankly, if we're going to build a team, we're going to build a team that everyone feels like a leader and a teammate. And that's where it starts. And when you believe that we're all teammates together, you can be incredibly powerful. If not, it becomes that plaque on the wall, Max, that you and I talked about, that we don't want to be. So I think it's about an organization looking inward, inside out job, and being authentic. And if they're not going to look inward and do the inside out job and be authentic, quite frankly, it's not going to work.
Okay, there's the answer. Now we're going to go a little deeper, so don't think it's done, right? So I really like the way that you kind of explained it, and I'm going to translate it, right? So in marketing, we've got the product market fit, right? Do you have the right audience identified, and do they have the problems that your product can solve? But I think that what you're referring to now is a culture team fit, right? So does a culture fit the team? Does a team fit the culture? And if you don't have that and it's authentic and real, then it's really not going to permeate. People really don't want to live up
They
to it,
don't buy
right?
in. They don't buy in.
Absolutely. And that's where I see with the best teams out there that I coach, that they really do make it their own, and in the management team really believes in it. So they start to enforce these points because it's their points, right? And the negative way of looking at it, it's like there's a little bit of brainwashing, or maybe brain cleansing, right? Because you get to become clear about what matters. And then when it really matters to the people, then that's how you know that the messaging is trickling down, and it becomes organic, and it's not a sheet of paper that you pull out and you start talking about, which I love. So ensuring that there's a culture team fit. So you've come into organizations that are already somewhat built up, and there's already people there, and you bring in this mindset. What happens then, right? So you come in, and there's a mismatch, right? Your culture, your values, your lofty goals don't necessarily fit the team that's there. What's the process? How
Yeah,
do you get everybody aligned?
that's a great question and great for your audience. I mean, the first thing I do is I interview every employee, from the receptionist to people on the warehouse floor, one at a time. And I say, tell me about your culture. Tell me about your business. Who are you? And I come into organizations either usually doing turnaround work or trying to get a business to the sale process. And they're all filled with great people and they're great brands, but they're all fragmented. Typically, they don't know who they are. Typically, they can't define their culture. And if they can, they'll tell you usually they're not living it. So once I do that intelligence work, that diligence to listen to every individual, and for me to be the listener and the learner, then I start to set the roadmap on how we have to collectively come together, how we have to galvanize as one team. And I don't force it. I talk about doing the work as a senior team. I talk about having town hall meetings and talking about problems and being vulnerable, where communication becomes a daily rep to do, and a cadence that's high. I communicate to the organization on a regular basis, frequently daily and weekly. Then it'll go to biweekly, then it'll go to monthly, but it's consistent. So when the organization always hears from leadership and also takes feedback from the organization, they start to trust. They start to believe this is the new chapter that the business is going into to build the company. And what happens is people get empowered to make a difference. So it's really hard work, but it's about consistency and diligence. And then it's about consistency in messaging on a regular basis. And talking about what works, talking about what you stink at, right? Being vulnerable. And ultimately, the goal is for all of us to be better competitors, to build our careers, to be a we culture. That is a profound word, being a we culture. It's profound because it's telling the organization, this is not an I culture. This is all of us, not one of us. And I think that's the organizations that sustain the test of time through a strong, powerful culture.
Scott, I love what you're sharing. It's at the core of what I believe leadership is, right? So on a note, we talk a lot about logos and culture and points of culture, and you've already said it a couple of times, which is one of my biggest messages, which is, who are you? So what is our corporate identity, right? Like the whole logo thing came from that. Who are we? What do we stand for? Being able to represent it visually and through words and through actions. And you've mentioned that a few times, and not everybody talks about that with that clarity. So just everyone out there, the power of your identity as an individual and as a company is where it all needs to start. Then at the end of the day, we've got to empower people. to empower people, you need to build trust. To build trust, you need to be able to take feedback, and you need to be able to learn from them, right? So it's kind of like the Japanese way, the more contemporary way of management is we are, as leaders, here to serve our team members. It's to help them achieve their goals. They achieve their goals. It's like inverting that pyramid, right? That hierarchical pyramid, and that's exactly what you're referring to. Then you can come up with that roadmap. So one of the questions I have is, what percentage of your time as a CEO is devoted to this? Because I can just imagine, right? So again, small business owners, mid-market company, it's like, that sounds great, but I have a job to do, right? I got to deliver on outcomes. I gotta get, the sales, the revenue, the profit. And I'm just listening to Scott, and Scott's investing a lot of time in that stuff. How does he do it? What percentage of this time is on that, and how does he make it possible?
Your comment is great. Hearing you say that's great, but I have a lot to deliver on. The biggest thing you deliver on is your people. People are the engine in your organization. It should be at least 40% of your time. No organization, whether you're an organization of 5 people or 50,000 people, can do more than a few things right. The one thing you should do is build a culture that has continuous improvement in everything they do. The second thing is focus on top line, sustainable profit. And the third thing you have to do is make sure you deliver and give back to your community. When you shut the lights off at the end of each week, if you do those 3 things, one of them will be out of whack, you'll have to make adjustments on, one you'll be doing really well. But people and culture should be at the top of those 3 things to do. Like I said, practice like you play, talk about it every week, make it part of your cadence, make it part of your behavior. Every organization has a behavior and habits. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Every organization has that. The goal for all of us is to slow down and close the gaps on the bad habits and get better at continuous improvement, get better at being constructively dissatisfied, and create a learning culture, shared learning, and also letting people know we're all leaders. The first thing that we're leaders of is ourselves, and then how you contribute to your organization.
So here's another one, right? So I'm channeling these entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders. And it's like, okay, that's great if you have the right people, but I don't have the right people. And I can identify that. And, what do I do? Do I get rid of 30, 40% of my workforce? I'm exaggerating here a little bit, right? But not all the time. They don't have the right people. What then? What is like your process of, I think, you're gonna match your culture and the culture that you're trying to build with the people that you have, but you're gonna identify some mismatch. What's the process? How do you actually do it? How do you help leaders and managers transition the people that are not a good fit?
Let's center ourselves first. Center ourselves on being personally accountable. Who are we hiring? How are we defining what our culture is? Who do we want in our business? If we don't know what we want, we take whatever we can get. That's where you start with what your culture is. Who are you hiring? Max, often I'll say to people like you, I've interviewed probably thousands of people in my career, and I often ask, tell me a little bit about Max. And what people say, common answer, I'm a hard worker, I'm honest, and I'm a family man. Close your eyes, almost anybody can say that. That doesn't define who Max is. When you ask who Scott is, I'm a family guy, I'm faith-based, I'm about others, and I'm about business. That's how I live my life. I live my life that way in my business life, and I live it my personal life. I toggle between those things in my personal life and my business life. And often one of them is a little out of whack, and I make adjustments. Do I need to serve others more? Do I need to spend more time with my family? Am I focused enough on my business? Where's my faith? When I do that, I know who I am. When life changes, I know how to kind of move through that and have a guiding principle, how to navigate. It's not good enough to say, I'm too busy, I have bad people in my organization. If you know who you want to be as a culture in a business, I know who I want to hire. Now, we're not going to get that right all the time. We're going to get some wrong, but we have guardrails. And my first guardrail is, are we a we culture? Do you contribute? Do you want to help a teammate? Do you want a problem solver? Do we want a finger point? We don't need finger pointers. That's a waste of time and a waste of energy. We need to problem solve together as one team. When we do that, we are better competitors. See, all this is about making us better competitors. All this is about making us better learners.
Yeah. So really appreciate the idea of personal accountability and looking inward and saying, hey, let's start with, are we hiring the right people? Are we clear about who we want to hire and what is important for us? And hopefully they have a great process. And if they don't, we've got lots of recommendations for them. But ultimately, there's people that shouldn't be there in the organization. And one of the biggest flaws that I see out there is that people take too long to take action on that, right? So many times there are people, like the easy ones you would think are the toxic people, the difficult ones to get along, the ones that don't perform, etc. Right? And yes, there are some of those, and yes, some of them actually stick around. But how about the just underperformers? Maybe are a good culture fit, maybe not so much, but they're just not getting the outcomes. Because I do see some organizations that have this people-centric approach to the organization, very caring, but they end up frustrating themselves and other team members because they keep people that shouldn't be there.
No, you're absolutely spot on. Most people wait too long to make a decision. And again, I come back to sound fundamentals. Practice like you play, do the reps, smart action. If the organization isn't doing those things, there's coaching sessions, there's development plans. But ultimately, our job is all to continue to raise the bar. And if people can't raise that bar and choose not to raise that bar, and they become our Achilles heel, then we have to make management decisions, right? But again, when my fundamentals are strong, practice like you play, do the reps, recalibrate, look inward, smart action, and really contribution. You have to evaluate that. And look, sometimes the locker room we're in isn't right for everybody, just like sports or teams. That wide receiver has to go play somewhere else. That quarterback has to leave. And sometimes those folks want to leave because it's just not that kind of environment. But I think the best part of a manager's job is to promote people. The hardest part is to make the decision to part ways. But again, the goal is if we're all on a path to continuous improvement, everybody wants to do that. And that's what we have to evaluate. And it comes back to understanding, do we have a fundamental process in place where we have a strong foundation that we can build this house on top of it? And with that, our decision tree becomes easier.
I think you're, what you're saying there is really powerful, and I think that our audience needs to understand this. So if we are a we culture, then and we have a weak link, we can have an honest conversation.
Exactly.
And they're probably going to be the first ones to realize how they are not being able to contribute to the well-being of the team. So they can identify themselves. And then it makes that transition a lot easier in the sense, right? Chances are they're going to try harder, they're going to work harder, they're going to try to figure out. But if they can't, then they're going to recognize it. And
I would say,
still have to help them probably.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Max. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. You want to coach and develop folks. But when you set your pillars up and your North Star and what you're in pursuit of, in my experience, most people decide, well, maybe this culture is not for me. It's too much pressure. It's too high paced. And they decide to move on their own. If not, we have a coaching session. We want to develop people. We want them to get better. We want them to make progress. We want them to benefit their own careers. But there is an expectation. There is a cadence. And there is the ability to really have smart action. So ultimately, I think when folks want to do that, they raise the bar and they get better. And when they decide they don't want to do that, they move on. They move on.
Scott, it sounds to me like you've got a bunch of plays in your playbook, in your book. So I'd love to hear about some of like your favorite go-to plays, whether it's how you have a coaching session or a coaching meeting, or how you have a town hall conversation, or how do you interview team members when you first arrive. I would really like to kind of double click, get a little deeper into that, and maybe share something that's in your book that, if our audience wants to kind of learn more about that, they can kind of read more about it.
Sure. I mean, the Summit Mindset is really a prescriptive book. Every chapter finishes with an exercise, finding your North Star. What's important? What are you in pursuit of? And it allows you to reflect and pause to think about what your North Star is, both professionally and personally. I think we need them in both sides of our life. It talks about pillars in an organization. What are your personal pillars? Like I chatted earlier, most people, when you ask them who they are, give you a standard answer. I want to know about Max. I want to know about Scott, who they really are. So we talk about those things. And we also talk about adversity. What happens when adversity hits in our business life or our personal life? Do we fold, or do we get stronger through that adversity because we have sound fundamentals? It asks you to think about the word happiness, right? Often seems like such an overused term. It's really an emotional state. But what really sets your soul on fire? Is it gardening? Is it horseback riding? Is it reading a book? To me, what sets my soul on fire, Max, is doing this with you, talking about business and life. I love this. This is happiness for me. So I think in our culture, we define happiness by a big house and a lot of money. But how many folks have we seen? Great athletes, great actors, great business people. One side of their life's working well, but the west side of their life is disproportionate upside down. So it's that well-rounded mastery of oneself, right? And the Summit Mindset is really about the mountain. The climate's always changing. And in business, the climate's always changing. And in life, the climate's always changing. It's about creating sound fundamentals to continue to climb.
I really appreciate that. And I'm just going to repeat it like 2 or 3 times because I think it's so powerful. It's so many times in life, we think that things are set. Right. I think that's kind of how we grow up, with rules have been set, and you have to stick to them. And you're saying, no, things change and you've got to be able to flow with them. And the climate, the weather, the conditions are all going to change. So you've got to be able to adapt to that in your personal life, in your business, your career, whatever it might be. So I really appreciate that. And I really believe that's cutting edge thinking, because for decades, it's all about these are the rules, and that's how you stick to them, and that doesn't take you through to the big improvements and outcomes. So repeated it twice. I'm going to repeat it one more time later.
No, so much.
Let's talk about pillars. How do I identify my pillars? How do I identify? So when I meet you and you ask me, hey, what is Max about? How can I make sure that I'm giving you a real true answer, and kind of like a glimpse into my soul, and really be able to define who I am and what matters to me? Take me a little bit through that process of how to accomplish that.
Yeah, first, I think you have to identify what are pillars, right? I mean, in the book, we talk about what are pillars. We define pillars, right? Pillars, if you think there's 4 corners to a house, what does your house stand on? What are the fundamentals? I think, and then you have to look inward and say, what are my pillars? What defines me? What makes me different as a human? And I say, once someone understands their pillars, you can live under a bridge because you have your pillars when the adversity comes, and you can know you're going to climb again. When an organization understands its pillars, they can rest and build their house on that organization when adversity and the curves in the road come that they never see coming. So first you have to say, do I understand what pillars are? And then you have to set out to say, what are my personal pillars? What's an organization's pillars? And they're very powerful. Like, my pillars in my entire life will never change. It'll always be my faith, my family, others, and business. And yes, they'll toggle different ways, but that's what I rest my life on and define myself by, always evolving there. Or an organization has to say, is people part of their pillars? Is, being number one part of their pillars? Is giving back to their community their pillars? Are they charitable? What is an organization's pillars? So you first have to do the work to whiteboard all that stuff. And it's not a rush. It's not a race to define them. It's a race for them to be authentically who you are as an individual and authentically who an organization is. And I think it's very, very powerful.
I appreciate that. And again, the word authenticity, right? Because so many times we think we want to be something. We have aspirations about how we think we should be or how we want to be, but it's not really who we are. It just comes from parents, teachers, media, or some other form that you're like, well, I think I have to be like that, but
Yeah,
it's
we
not
also become
genuine to you.
conformed, right? We become conformed. I've seen this through young people, middle-aged people, and older people. We can conform to what we think society wants us to be and what society tells us to be, what an organization tells us to be. I believe an organization is built up in individuals with diversity of thought, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of gender. When you have all those things and you can all learn from each other, you continue to get better. You know, an individual is the same. So you want to be able to, as an individual, walk into a room of regular folks and be a regular person. You want to be able to walk into a room of leaders and still be that regular person because you know who you are.
Yeah.
Very important. And I think very authentic. And it's the work we have to do to get comfortable in our own skin. And an organization has to do a work. That's why the Summit Mindset is a hybrid book, to be comfortable and know who they are in an organization. I'll tell you quickly, quick story, when we sold Essential Water to Nestle, the #1 food and beverage company in the world. What a great company filled with great people and great legacy. But we were proud of who Essential was, of this, what we call this tiny but mighty business, a people first organization. We could show examples of our actions of being people first. And we were proud when we integrated that business. I stayed there for a year integrating that business of who we were. And Nestle was proud to receive us, and we were proud to receive them, who would give us more resources and more opportunities. So again, because we knew who we were proud. And because we could learn from them as well, we're a learning culture, we knew there's a lot that Nestle could teach us as well.
So it comes back down, and it really is all revolving around your identity, right? Like your individual identity, your company's identity, your corporate identity. And step number one is, what are your pillars?
What's your
What
culture?
defines you?
Who are you? Who are you as a culture?
Yeah. Who are you? What really matters to you? Then you've got to ideate, right? You got to whiteboard it. You got to put them there. Then you gotta be authentic and genuine with yourself, and not be aspirational, and not be like, well, this is what I think I should be, but rather this is what really matters to me. And it's going to require contemplation and reflection, right?
Yeah, Max, you're totally right. It's an inside out job, as we started to talk earlier. Organizations always have to look inside out. Individuals have to look inside out. We're humans, we're imperfect, and that's okay. But if we're pliable and it's like a Rubik's Cube, we can keep changing it. We can talk about what we stink at and we can recalibrate. How beautiful is that? How special is that when you can get to that place? We're not pointing fingers, we're just recalibrating together. We're being pliable together. I always say, it's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Yep. Not perfection, but progress. So I think we have a little bit of time for one more, like, how to, right?
Sure.
So I would love to hear a little bit about how you conduct your town hall meetings, for example. That's a big subject. Definitely like to discuss that. But it's scary. It is, you have to be vulnerable. You've got to be genuine. You're going to have to maybe answer some difficult questions. You're going to have to deal with some skepticism. What is your approach for town hall meetings?
Great question. I love town hall meetings. First of all, I like to set the stage of what we're going to talk about. I talk about what we stink at, where we can improve things, what we're doing well at. Then let's ask other departments to participate. Let's talk about the supply chain business. Let the finance team and the marketing team hear about the problems in the supply chain, how we solve them together. Let's talk about finance, what we're doing in the back office to make ourselves more efficient. So it's not just a top-down meeting from the CEO or the leadership team. It's everybody participating. Then we open it up to open forum for questions. And I always say, I want the tough questions. You may not like the answer we're going to give you organizationally, but we will explain to you how we got there, why we made the decision. And when we make a mistake, we'll talk about it and say, hey, we'll adjust, we'll recalibrate. When the organization starts to feel that both ways, they believe in the valuable voice. They believe that there's no finger pointing, and the organization's talking openly about what they're doing. I also want to let them know what the profit goal is, how we're going to create sustainable profitability. I want to ask questions on how's the culture? How do you think we're doing? Where are our gaps? How are we living our pillars? Are we giving back to our community and letting everybody participate? So I love town halls because it's an opportunity to see your progress and also to look at your blind spots. Every organization has blind spots. Every organization has rooms to improve. And it's that mindset of continuous improvement. It also gives you the time to authentically talk to the organization, share with where you're going, right? And let the organization speak back to you. Incredibly powerful.
I really appreciate that. And, I think it enables the team who's at the trenches, who can see the changing winds, right? The changing conditions to report back, to communicate,
Yes.
to tell management how they are screwing up, and gives them that voice and gives them that opportunity. And it also helps to clarify strategy, direction, why we're doing what we're doing, and to have a conversation about it. So it's not to please the people and settle them down, right? It's really a collaboration, and there's a lot of knowledge and an alignment that gets built there. Plus, I really believe that town halls are critical to really build a community, right?
Yeah.
So to really build the sense of community that we're all in this together. So that's really good. Scott, I'm gonna do a little bit of a summary here of what we've discussed. I have pages and pages of notes. I might be missing some things, and I'm sure there's a few other things that you'd like to share with our audience that I haven't gotten to ask you or talk about. So you'll have an opportunity to fill those gaps, as you like to call them, and share as soon as I'm done with this, and then we'll start to kind of wrap up a little bit.
Sounds great.
So let's see. Launching a new startup, which is, I'm sure, very exciting and interesting and different, right? So building and growing large organizations is kind of pretty much starting with 3 people. It's a big change. Big philosophical point of view is that we've got to lead ourselves first, and we're all leaders, and it all really starts with us. A common thread in this conversation is knowing who you are and knowing your identity. And for that, you got to understand your pillars, right? You got to understand your pillars. You got to figure them out. You got to get very clear about them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And it's never about me. It's always about us. It's about the team.
Agreed.
You were kind enough to share a little bit about your story and how, your father shared some words of wanting to have tried harder. And that kind of inspired you to look at life as a lifelong journey for growth and improvement, and always wanting to get better and playing the long game. So it never ends, and you're always working to get better. Leaders have to be learners, and you instill that in all the organizations you're part of. So you can learn something from everyone or anyone. It doesn't matter who they are. You can learn something. And at the same time, you should be teaching anyone and everyone, whether it's with books, whether it's excerpts, quotes, concepts, ideas. You got to be sharing that. You got to model the behaviors that you're looking for. So if you want people to act a certain way, well, you've got to be the first one to act in that way. Play the long game, and you always have to be in pursuit of something, right? That keeps you with a drive, with an energy, with an excitement about what's coming, about the future. You've got to be working on creating good fundamentals, and they can help you, in the good times. They can help you in the bad times, but it'll help you build on top of those. And then it all starts with pillars. So be very open, clear, aware of your weakness gaps, right? And if you're going to be a growing organization and you've got big aspirations, there's going to be gaps, and it's a positive thing to be able to identify them, which leads us into the next section, which I thought was fantastic. When you talked about it's constructive but critical, right? So it's constructive criticism, and it's okay to be dissatisfied. So
Totally.
I guess and that dissatisfaction is a positive thing. So it's not something to be frowned upon. It's something to be encouraged about, happy about, because it's what's going to allow us to get better. So it starts with culture, communication, daily cadence, identifying the gaps in being critical about them in a positive way. Complacency is where dreams go to die. So you always want to avoid that. And you do that by having lofty goals, right? Leadership has to be vulnerable. We're not perfect. We're learning, and we're learning from each other and continuing to grow. Lofty goals again. We talked a little bit about being the smartest person in the room versus a we culture. And you've got to recognize that very quickly and really recognize that the collective brain is smarter than any individual. And you got to work together to be able to accomplish great things. And it's not about saying it, it's about doing it. It's about having the very specific and consistent actions that demonstrate the culture that you're trying to be. You got to do the reps. You got to do the reps. You got to evaluate the culture. You got to do the reps. You got to take smart action. You got to reflect. You got to reflect weekly. You got to reflect daily on the progress. So we then talked a little bit about this idea of it's not just about product market fit, it's a culture team fit, right? So that's for companies that might already have a bunch of people, or if you're going into a leadership position, you've got to ensure that there's a good fit there. Okay, man, we took a lot of notes here today. All right. So, the question is like, okay, well, you're coming into an organization. What do you do? Well, interview every employee, get to know who they are, get to understand their culture, get their feedback, build trust. That's the way that you can empower them. And that's the way that you can empower them back. Then you can build a roadmap on how you're going to be able to achieve great things and how to achieve them together. And then make sure that you have the frequent communication. And then you talked a little bit about how at first communication is very intense and intensive. And then you might trickle, you might ease up on it a little bit, but you're always maintain some meeting rhythms. You're pretty strict about them. You mentioned 3 big ideas consistently. It's we all want to be competitors. We all want to build careers, be competitive, but we're going to be doing it as a we culture, right? Okay, another really important concept. 40% of your time is devoted to culture and team, right? I'm going to repeat that, 40%. It's like, hey, but you're a CEO, you've got to deliver on outcomes, you've got to deliver on bottom line profitability. And yes, but that happens by focusing on the team. So, and I really like you said, you focus on your team, you focus on profit, and you focus on the community. You got to contribute to the community, right? You got to contribute to profit, you got to contribute to your team. Let's see, personal accountability. There was a lot of that, right? And in this case, we talked about what happens when you don't have the right people. And you said, well, the first thing is we got to look and see if we're hiring the right people. And are we clear about who we want to hire, and are we hiring more of them? You talked about practice like you play. Did I get that right?
Sure.
So practice like you play, take smart actions, do the reps, look inwards as some concepts that showed up consistently. Really important concept. And I'm really glad you touched on it. Conditions change. So you've got to look at everything as dynamic and flexible. And we need to be consistently adapting. It's not the old way that the rules are set and set forever. It's the new way of we've got to be understanding how those conditions are changing. Then we talked about your individual pillars. And it's kind of like where it all starts, right? Who are you? What's your identity? And first you need to understand, hey, what are pillars? What defines you? What really matters to you? What sets your soul on fire? Generate ideas, be authentic about them, contemplate, reflect on them to help you start crafting that clarity on who you really are and what really matters to you. It's not about what the media tells you. It's not what about society tells you. It's about what's like really, really deep in your heart. And ultimately, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. right? It's about consistently making progress, consistently getting clear about who you are and what matters to you, which is going to kind of be pointing you in the right direction. And then we talked a little bit about town hall meetings. So set an agenda, review what you're good at, review what you're bad at, review the challenges, um, get updates on progress, on what the organization is moving towards, be open to questions, be open to difficult questions, be open about goals, numbers, metrics, the whole thing, and get your team, right? It's not just about the leader, the CEO going and talking to the team, but it's about the groups and the teams giving updates and progress and sharing their successes, their struggles, what they need work on. And then ultimately getting a lot of feedback from the team, from the front lines, and helping. It's like an effort in helping management figure out what they're doing right, what they're screwing up on, and being able to communicate the efforts to the rest of the team. So there was a whole lot more there, but that's my summary, if you can imagine that. All right.
Excellent summary, and I really appreciate that. Max, I would add two things that are really important for your audience. One, I'd encourage everyone to have courage. I think that, like we said earlier, people often conform and they become something, they look back on life and they're unhappy with their journey. And also, the second thing I'd encourage people to do is there's never failure in attempt. There's only failure in lack of attempt. I never worry about failure when I'm in an attempt, because when I'm failing, I'm learning. And in my own life, my greatest learnings have come through struggle. The victory lane is actually the easy part because the work's done. But the journey, the struggle is where we learn and grow. So there's never failure in attempt, only failure in lack of attempt. Have courage in life. This isn't a dress rehearsal. We only live one time. And business and life is really about solving problems and knowing who you are and knowing what sets your soul on fire, man. Because at the end of the day, that's what gets us energized about life, being in pursuit of something. I've loved this conversation with you. This sets my soul on fire, this conversation, because hopefully we touch some folks, give people a reason to pause and think and do the reps and practice like they play.
I really appreciate that. And those two huge concepts at the end really put a nice bow to our conversation, because they are super powerful and critical to great leadership, great progress, great success. And maybe we have a title for your next book, right? Setting Your Soul on Fire.
Maybe.
Yeah. Scott, so before I let you go, talking about setting your soul on fire, what is something you're excited about, looking forward to, that's going to be happening here in the next few weeks or months?
Yeah, look, like I said earlier, I'm excited about the book coming out. We're opening up a lot of markets on Yesly, and every day I'm excited about waking up and doing the reps and meeting folks like yourself, doing more podcast work, getting the word out, because at the end of the day, we're all on this journey together. And it's almost the journey of life isn't just individual, it's about building community, to your earlier words, Max. So I'm always excited to talk about leadership, to talk about people. And I'm also excited to win days and fail days and continue to evolve. At the end of the day, I just want to be the best human I can be. And I want to build friendships and relationships and make a difference, and always be in pursuit of life, because that's what gets me up in the morning.
That's amazing, Scott. That's amazing. So everybody out there, go take a look at the Summit Mindset, right? It'll help you. Trust me, there's more than one nugget in there. It's all about the inner game and getting better at it, and having practical advice on that book on how to actually go and do it versus just, talking about some theory, I think is a game changer for everyone out there that's listening. Scott, where can people find you?
You can find the book, The Summit Mindset, thebook.com. That's our website. You can also pre-order on Amazon now. You can find me on my little personal Instagram, which is just Scott Miller, you versus you. That's it. Scott Miller - you versus you. And look forward to reaching out and speaking to folks about leadership and life.
Scott, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a great time, and it's been a bunch of powerful lessons. So thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you for building organizations that have strong values, character, identity, courage, and I'm going to expect great things from the company, right? And I can't wait to go out and try your beverages as well.
Well, Max, it's been an honor to spend time with you. Thanks for your great questions. And it seems like you love leadership, you love people, and this is a way to give back just from us spending some time together. So thank you for this time today. I truly enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Thank you.